In today's workshop, we're going to be talking about cultivating a robust attitude so you can thrive in the media business. And specifically, I'm going to review some practical advice on surviving and thriving in what is an incredibly competitive industry. I'm not a mental healthcare professional, and so I hope you won't rely on this work for mental health advice or support. I'm running this workshops to share strategies, solutions, and resources that I and others I've known have used to survive and thrive year after year as media creators. So take it in that context as opposed to believing these tools and tactics are a replacement for working with a professional therapist, which in some cases really is warranted. If you're working in the entertainment industry and you're really struggling with anxiety or rage or self-destructive thoughts, or if you've experienced significant trauma, uh, which is certainly possible when you're working in the entertainment industry, I think it is a really good idea to get professional mental health care. I think many creative minds benefit a lot from expert psychological advice and support. And now with online counseling, it really has never been easier or more easier to get or more widely available. If you think you felt for a long time that you might need that kind of support, but you haven't sought it out, I hope you'll take this as encouragement to do. If it can make a huge difference if you're really struggling with things that are serious. We're going to be talking about several aspects of how to work in the entertainment industry, and we'll be addressing practical measures, social support, how to maintain your freedom of creative expression, specific strategies and tactics, useful resources that you'll find help make things easier for you. By the time we're done with this workshop, I hope that you will have acquired quite a number of solutions that you can use going forward when you're having really bad days or when you find yourself in troubled waters and you need to find a way out. I think most people that work in the entertainment industry at one point or another find themselves thinking, oh my God, why is this so difficult? Why is this so hard? Shouldn't it all be easier? What am I doing wrong? I must be doing something wrong because I've never been so unhappy. I thought this was going to make me happy. I thought when I had the freedom and the time to work as a writer or a screenwriter, as a producer, as a performer, I thought that I would just fall in love. I've wanted to do this my whole life, and it's just turning into a miserable experience. I think the reason that a lot of times people are surprised by how difficult it is to work in the entertainment industry is because nobody pulls you aside early on and explains some of the more difficult aspects of working in the industry or working as a media creative. The first thing is that professional media creatives are constantly facing assessment, critique, and rejection all the time. And furthermore, not only are we constantly having our work assessed, critiqued, and rejected, that those critiques and rejections and assessments also impact our ability to support ourselves and our families. It's not like this feedback comes to you without any cost. It comes with a lot of costs. If the producer that you're working with and you don't hit it off and you're a screenwriter, you're going to have a hard time keeping that job. You're going to have a hard time getting paid. When you are working as a producer and people don't like the content that you produce, you're not going to get distribution. You're not going to get investment. You're not going to get funding. You're not going to get help from the name talent that you may need in order to make a project go forward. It's a very stressful situation to be in, and if you find yourself being overwhelmed by that stress, you're not alone. It happens to everybody from time to time, and sometimes when projects are in key moments, it happens to everybody working on a project at the same time. It can be huge crises of confidence throughout your career. It's just part of the business. The next thing that makes working in the entertainment industry really a struggle is that constant innovation is required. Our survival depends upon our ability to create on demand and to create to specification. The race never seems won, and many creatives never feel that they have arrived. I've spoken to many cinematographers, some who have worked on shows that are written in history as some of the most important movies in the world, and they haven't felt that secure in their careers. They've wondered after they did a really great movie, even after it won awards, whether or not they'd ever have the opportunity to work again. I've known people who've won Academy Awards and Emmy Awards who find it difficult to get work because for some reason or another, they're not flavor of the month, because they're not perceived as being able to innovate and create content for a new market. No wonder that people get stressed out by working in the entertainment industry. Even when you're incredibly successful, it doesn't translate into you being secure financially or in terms of work going forward. Finally, every project that you work on throws curveballs, and the industry as a whole is boom and bust. The work changes, how you get work changes, and the people you work with changes all the time. Working as a media creative is a really inherently challenging environment. For some of us, because we are creative and because we do have the kind of mind that adapts quickly, we don't find it as difficult, perhaps, as other people do. A lot of times we're open to change. A lot of times we do have a flexible mind. We can come up with new solutions on demand. And especially when we're working with good people, there's a lot of innovation that appears in the room. But from time to time, all of us are going to hit a wall where we think, this is not working out. This is just, I don't know how to go forward from this position. And I think I might have made a mistake just by choosing to work in media instead of picking something that was a little more boring and certainly not something that I wanted to do, but at least something that would be stable. Let's talk a little bit more about the reasonable distress you might feel from time to time. One thing that I think is interesting is that many creatives, many people that enjoy being writers or screenwriters, designers, production designers, performers, producers, many of us, we're inherently creative people. And frankly, our creative expression is how we remain sane. Initially, when we were very young, most of us used our work to express our feelings and to find connections with people that were like us and to make ourselves heard. And in those days, what was true was good, right? You would be sitting in your kindergarten class and you'd be drawing little cartoons like you'd been doing since you were even younger, and your teacher would pick up your paper and go, "That's amazing. I can't believe you created something so wonderful." And the other kids in the class would go, "Wow, that's amazing." And you created something that you loved, your teacher loved it, the kids in the class loved it, and all of a sudden you were connected to the world, and your creative expression had not only been emotionally fulfilling for you, but it's also connected you to other people around you. It was just an incredibly powerful feeling. When you decide you're going to work in the entertainment industry, or when you decide that you're going to make media for money, you have new goalposts. When you work professionally in media and you're seeking to get paid, you have other benchmarks that you have to pay attention to. You have the buyer, your collaborators, the audience, and depending on if you're a producer or a performer or a screenwriter, if you're an author, you have to be able to make readers happy. And most of the time, you're going to be writing in genres. So you'll have to make the readers of a particular genre happy, and only really a micro segment of that genre. It's just incredibly challenging. And pleasing some or all of these folks at any given time is really what gets us paid. Our career relies upon our ability to create on-demand content that people like. In that situation, what happens to your joy and freedom in creating? So you had the solution, you had this thing you used to do when you were young that you loved doing, that was emotionally fulfilling in and of itself. And then suddenly you're taking that talent and you're, in some sense, enslaving it in order to be able to earn a living from it. So early on, you're creating work from the heart, and then subsequently you're creating work for people who choose to hire you or that you choose to work for. And sometimes what they want to create is nothing like what you want to create. And it's nothing like you really want to even be a part of, because most of us have to take the work that's offered to us at any given time. Early on, if you create work from the heart, some very lucky people, they create their initial works, their initial little films, they write their initial screenplays, they produce their initial podcasts, and they get a lot of support right at the very beginning. They find a lot of fans, and because they have a lot of paying fans, they end up with a lot of industry support. And those folks do actually get a lot of creative freedom to work on similar work for money. But if people, when they start producing that content, initially don't find those fans or support, then what happens is they don't really have that same level of creative freedom. They have to join on to other people's projects rather than being able to have projects built around them. Also, sometimes even if you've had great success at a particular project, or you've created a whole bunch of content, you were acknowledged, you've had a certain level of success, you become typecast for delivering that kind of content. And then if what you want to do evolves, suddenly you're back in the position of always having to create this particular content that you don't really want to create because people demand it, when really you'd rather be working on something else. And ultimately, it comes down to most of us at one point or another, and sometimes for a significant percentage of our time, end up having to create what others love in order to be able to earn a living from our work. Sometimes your personal and professional brands conflict so much that it is really hard to bear. And it may be that your personal work never really gets to see the light of day. Spending all your days creating what you do not love can be a real problem for a creative mind. So we started creating as an outlet for our emotions, as a method for externalizing and capturing the truths and insights that we have, as a way to communicate with ourselves about our experiences, our wants, and our fears, to communicate with and find the community with those who happen to be around us, to earn attention, approbation, and support from others, and because creating was something people said we were good at. It is really tough to lose that refuge of feeling very comfortable in our work. And that's something that happens to a lot of people, even very successful people working in the entertainment industry and doing it for a living. If you're doing it professionally and you have to pay your bills by creating media, then it's at some point you're going to be torn away from creating the content that you care the most about to doing content that other people are willing to pay you for, whether it's audiences or it's producers or it's directors or it's book publishers, etc. We turned pro, most of us, because we wanted to earn money making the media that we love, because we have a competitive advantage in other people in terms of creating certain kinds of work, because we wanted to work with other creatives on mutually beneficial creative projects. There's absolutely nothing better than working with a team of creatives on something that everybody on the project cares about. It's pure magic, isn't it? We turned pro because no other profession appealed to us quite as much. And we turned pro because we felt using our creative skills professionally gave us the best chance of a good life. Having said all that, it's really tough to endure criticism when we're personally invested and intimately involved in all of the work that we do. I think if I'm an accountant and I'm working for a particular company, or a bookkeeper and I'm working for a particular company, the numbers are the numbers. My job is to get all the invoices and all the receipts and all of the inventory. My job is to track all of the financial information and to put it in a spreadsheet. And the truth is the truth, right? It's all about what's happening in the outside world. Those of us who are creating content, we're taking stuff that we originate, that we create from our own hearts, our own minds, our own thoughts, our own experiences. We put it out there to be incorporated into projects and to be assessed and sold in a wide variety of ways. It is really personal when people comment on it, especially when they're not particularly creative, when they don't know how hard it is how hard the work is to do, when what they're asking for is something that is impossible to create. And even if you did create it, you're not sure that people would like it, and that would be your fault as well. These are inherent conflicts in being a media maker, especially if you're going to do it professionally. And finally, many of us never really actually decided to make media a career. We didn't do research. We didn't consider all the other alternatives that we had. We just fell into it. We felt driven to create. We figured we had to build our financial lives around our creative expression because that was the only thing we ever really wanted to do. We didn't envision what our lives were actually going to look like or feel like to live. even those of us who had a previous career where we were very successful, when we decided to move into creating content for a living, media for a living, we thought it was going to be easier than what we've been doing before because we hadn't really loved that necessarily. We thought it would be living a dream to be able to create media for a living. But the problem is, once you decide you're going to do it professionally, once you decide that you have to get paid, once it has to support you, then all of a sudden it really matters what the audience thinks and or what the people who are hiring you think. And then it stops being about what you want to create and starts being about what they want to pay you to create. And not to depress you further, but I think it's important to name some very specific, frustrating financial realities. First of all, this is an inherently boom and bust business. Most of us do not have a marketing and a management team lining up our next gig. So we have downtime between each project. If we're working at a particular studio or on a particular independent film project and that job goes away, we have we don't have our next job lined up. So we have to figure out how to get that next job. And sometimes we're going to be out of work for a month or two or three or four. And that is a huge problem. It means that we have to actually save money for those times, or we have to live on credit while we're trying to put together a deal. So it's funny because sometimes people think, wow, people in Hollywood get paid so much because sometimes they are making $5,000, $10,000 a week. Some of the actors are making $30,000 a week for performance. But the thing is, they might not have another job 2 or 3 or 4 years after a particular project ends. So that boom and bust cycle makes it really hard to feel comfortable that financially, no matter how much money you have in the bank and no matter how much good work you're currently doing, and no matter how popular you are at any given time. Even the full-timers struggle because even if you're working full-time for a media company, your employment can absolutely be rocked by strikes, or something like AI can come along and your job can change radically, or your company can collapse and make mistakes to put them out of business, which can terminate your employment. Also, even all of us eventually get ill, or we break a leg or something happens, and that can prevent us from working as well. That turns into us always saying yes to projects. Most of us don't turn work away, no matter how busy we are, because we aren't sure when the next gig is going to be coming down the pike. And so we don't want those people that we work with to find other providers for what we do. Jobs are so hard to get, and the relationships that actually give you money are so hard to find, that when somebody calls you up and says, hey, can you do this project? Unless we absolutely can't, because we absolutely are up to our ears on another project, we're going to say yes. And sometimes that means we're taking on multiple projects. We shoot one thing during the week and then we shoot something else on the weekend, and then we've given up sleeping entirely because we have something we also have to edit. Looking for new work is a constant pressure. Every time we lose a gig, we have to scramble for new work, whether it's ISO writing gigs or Fiverr or Upwork or Media Bistro or LinkedIn or Indeed or hundreds of other sites. We have to go shopping for new projects. We have to develop new relationships. We have to find new people who are willing to hire us. And fundamentally, it's a drag to feel like we're on the edge of a precipice all the time. So if you're feeling stressed out by working on the entertainment industry or working in media as a media creator, it really does make sense. You're not crazy. You're not making a mistake. You're not fundamentally not built to work in the entertainment industry. You're just facing some of the realities of what it takes to work in the entertainment industry. You have to really consider your quality of life. First, my personal belief is it's very important to consider your creative freedom. I think being a creative professional requires thinking about the creative work you're doing. And when it's in direct conflict with work that you actually like and want to do, it is pretty agonizing. And it's also agonizing when you feel forced to work with difficult, demanding, ungrateful, or dishonest people. My own experience is that if my creative freedom gets too offended, when I find myself feeling too constricted, that it doesn't matter how much money I'm making. I'm so unhappy that I can't possibly continue working. I have to find something else to do. And we'll talk more about how to do that in a moment. But uh, I think that too few creative professionals are they're not really encouraged to admit that the kind of work they're creating is work that they don't want to do, and the fact that it's work that they hate doing is really messing up their head, because it used to be the case that the creative work that they did was something they took a lot of joy in, and now that joy has completely evaporated and they're spending most of their time doing stuff they really don't like. The second thing is financial freedom is very important to your quality of life. Being able to stop looking for work constantly and being able to turn work down when you really don't want to do it is a huge step to feeling much more comfortable. If you can earn a good living, pay all your bills, then you've taken a huge step to a much higher quality of life for most people. Now, I just mentioned a couple of things that I think are relevant. First, just a quick reminder, no one can really stop you from creating work that you like. Creating your own projects that are art rather than money is important. I think a lot of people, once they start writing for money, they don't ever they start not writing passion projects. They give those passion projects up because they have to focus on what pays. But the problem is giving up that work translates into taking all the pleasure out of creative work. And I think that not only impacts how you feel emotionally, it also impacts the quality of work that you can produce. The other thing is, I think it's important that you share the work that you create on your own, your passion project, so to speak. And I think you can always share work on social media and elsewhere these days. It may be the case that you have to do that work under a pseudonym or something so that it doesn't interfere with the work, day-to-day work that you get paid for. That can be tricky, but on the other hand, I think sometimes those passion projects that you do translate into new opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't get. Just a quick reminder, give yourself permission to be able to create work that you actually care about. If you're an actor, it might be the case that you spend most of your time doing commercials and all kinds of independent horror films or something like that. Maybe it makes sense for you also to participate in a theatrical community where you can actually do plays from time to time, or even if they're just one act plays, because then you can actually go back to the roots of your acting. If you're a writer or an author, it could be the case that you set aside time every week for you to do creative writing that's not related to the work that you get paid for. Second, as a creative, it's important to remember you have a lot of skills to sell. And the more time you spend identifying work you can easily and happily do, and the more opportunity you're going to get to pick the projects you want to do and the people that you want to work with. If it is the case that you are an excellent screenwriter, chances are you might also be fairly good at being a script doctor. If you are a good writer, it might well be the case that you'd also make a really great editor. If you are a good producer, it might well be the case that you can be useful as working for a distributor, helping them acquire films that are going to sell. My point is, most of us have multiple sets of skills, and we can choose which ones we're going to use on any particular project. We don't have to pick the one that uh, is most directly tied to the kind of creative work that we most want to do. Furthermore, being able to shift between work that's very creative and work that may be less creative, might be more mechanical, uh, lets us trade back and forth between work where we're being judged for what we do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on a creative standpoint, the creative work that we bring to the table, versus when we're just working on a mechanical project that is not editing somebody else's book and helping it get to publication is a little bit easier than writing a book yourself and getting that book to publication. Just two different levels of work, two different levels of commitment. And it could be the case for that editing ends up paying more than writing from time to time. So branching out the work that you're willing to do and seeing different ways to use your skills can make it so that you get a lot more creative freedom and a lot less stress. And you can actually get paid more routinely because you're not boxing yourself into something that is harder work to get. Over the years, having worked with and supported a lot of creative people, I have some pretty strong opinions about steps that I think creative people should undertake in order to be able to work quickly, cost effectively, productively, happily, profitably for the long term. The first thing is, I'm a big believer in making sure that you get adequate health care. I think most of us who are adults do not spend enough time. We don't get our yearly physical. Uh, we don't, if we have chronic conditions, we're the kind of people who maybe don't necessarily take those high blood pressure pills or don't handle our diabetes. I think in the long run, that translates into a much lower quality of life, and it translates into um, anxiety, depression, uh, just general misery because you're not really feeling well. And I think even if you don't have an acute illness, if I burn my hand, I feel the pain right away and it sends a pretty clear signal I've got a problem that I have to deal with. But I think a lot of these longer running illnesses, you don't feel them right away. I think you get depressed or you get anxious or you feel fatigued or you feel uh, lethargic, which you interpret as profound depression. And really, you're ill and you should go to the doctor. And I have to say, I speak from experience because I spent a period of time where I really thought I felt like I was 100 years old. I just felt really miserable. And it turned out that I actually had thyroid cancer. And I swear to God, the day after the thyroid surgery, I felt like $1,000,000. They gave me that fine synthroid replacement thyroid. It was like I had been born again. And I, over the course of my life, having worked with a lot of creative professionals, it's not a surprise to me when they fail to take care of themselves or they fail to get the treatments that they need, and they end up, or they talk about being profoundly depressed and they can't really figure out why. And it doesn't surprise me when they come back and they go, oh, it turns out I have an ailment. And now that I'm treating it, I feel about 50,000 times better. And it's true. Even cancer, a lot of times you feel better treating cancer as opposed to not treating it. I will tell you for a fact. I do think that it's important that people get exercise. And I think exercise every day is important. I think sleeping every day is important. And it's one of the reasons that I think the industry's commitment to the 12-hour workday is really problematic, especially when people have to drive from the set to sleep at home to drive back to the set the next day. A lot of times they're not getting 8 hours of sleep, and a lot of times they're working 6 days a week. I think that's very problematic. And I think doing it month after month is it probably ought to be illegal, actually, because I think it's dangerous to people. And I think the fact that it's one of the things that the unions have been taking a hard look at. I think there's a reason for that, because I think people do get hurt when they're driving home. And I think it does have a tremendous negative impact on their day-to-day life. I think too much caffeine and tobacco are really a problem. And that also is speaking from experience, not the tobacco. From time to time, I'll get hooked on 2 or 3 cups of coffee. And then I'll realize that my stress levels are absolutely through the roof. And then I won't drink coffee for a couple of weeks and I'll feel like blissfully happy. So taking care of yourself physically, I think, is something too few creatives actually commit to doing. And I think if you want to be able to have a long, successful, profitable career in the entertainment industry, it's important. More importantly, if you want to be able to feel like you're having a great life in the entertainment industry, taking care of yourself physically is an important step in that direction. You won't be, no matter how great your career is going, if you're feeling ill, it's not going to matter. You're not going to be able to feel successful because you feel bad because you're ill. Next thing is maintain your social connections. Most media creatives are working very hard. And the more they work, the more hours they work, the more isolated they feel. It's important that you maintain healthy connections with your family and friends in the real world, even if it's only by phone and email. Because if you make creating media your whole world, fundamentally, you're basing your social connections on people that you work with who may or may not be there next week. Because as we know in the entertainment industry, no matter how close people feel when they're working on a set or working together on a particular project, when the project goes away, everybody has to go work on something else. And that means that group of people is not going to be there to support you going forward. More uh, also, when you're working in the entertainment industry and everything is based upon what an audience will, a mythical audience that somebody believes exists will like, as interpreted by a producer or by a director or by a distributor or by any of the other people that are senior members of our creative teams. You don't get a lot of signals from real people about stuff that really matters in the actual real world that we actually live in. Nobody really knows what an audience is going to think about anything. We imagine that we know what they're going to think. But the thing is, you have real friends and you have real family members, and you might as well pay attention to what those real people actually think about you, because you live in the real world, not in this fictional world with this fictional audience that other people are trying to interpret, you know, what they're going to like and what they're not going to like. It's grounding to maintain those real world relationships. The third thing I think is really important is creative professionals have to be better than most at recognizing what headspace they're in, recognizing sort of the train of their thoughts. Are you engaging in black and white thinking where people are all good and all bad, or where things are going to be totally amazing or they're going to be totally awful, or everyone's out to get you or everyone's out to help you? That kind of black and white thinking is very toxic. It, there's almost no good that can come of thinking in terms of black and white, either or, because when you're working in the entertainment industry, you have to solve problems, and a lot of times you need to be able to look at 5 or 10 or 20 solutions comfortably and pick the right one for any particular task. Are you assuming the worst is going to happen? Are you assuming the worst about other options that you haven't chosen? Have you decided that you know everything? Deciding that nothing and no one can help you? Even when things are going well, these headspaces lead to trouble because they're really rigid and they're insensitive to the real world that exists around you, in real world conditions that you actually have to live with, and that your creative work has to accommodate, shall we say. In some states of mind, it's really hard to see and seize good options. So recognizing your headspace, recognizing I am not thinking clearly. This is not a good time to make decisions. This is a good time to find a way to get out of this headspace, is what this is. Sometimes is the most important thing you can do as a creative. Fourth, I do think it's important that creatives assess their quality of life often. Do you know what you want in real world terms? Do you know what experiences you want? Do you know what lifestyle you want? Do you know how you want to spend your time and money? Do you know what's working right now and what's not? It could be the case that you say, listen, I'm going to be happy if I can work from home and I can write stuff that I don't hate and I can work with people that I mostly like. And if I get to spend 2 weeks in Rome every year, and if I have enough money to pay the mortgage on my house, those are the things I need to be happy. If you have that shopping list, it's a lot easier to get those things. If you do not have a list of what's going to actually make you happy, it's really hard to acquire those things. It's also hard to know what's working and what's not. For example, you might say, here's the thing. I really don't like the content that I'm creating, and I really don't like the guy that I'm working directly for, but I do the fact that I'm making enough money to pay my mortgage, and I do the fact that this job happens to actually give me 2 weeks off a year, and I have enough money to be able to plan that trip to Rome that I like to take. So I know what's working, I know what's not. And that means I can work on fixing what's not exactly working well. And I realize many of us don't have a 9 to 5 job. I'm using that as an example. A lot of my examples at the moment are imagining that you're working with productions and studios that provide those kinds of unique benefits. But I'm just using those things as an example. It could be the case if you're a screenwriter, that you've managed to write enough screenplays and you've won some contests and you managed to get yourself a agent, and you could say, look, I like the projects that I've currently created. I like my agent. I think he's really working hard for me. What's not working for me is that people are not offering me options. They're not offering me options that pay enough in order for me to be able to live off my option money. So I need to find a way to be able to maintain the writing that I do, but simultaneously generate enough revenue for me to live on. So how can I do that? So assessing your quality of life on a regular basis and deciding what's working and what's not working and what you want to have change and what you want to remain the same, I think is a huge step to achieving a significantly higher level of well-being. When you know that you've lost your mental balance and you've got this feeling that things are spiraling out of control and that you're not able to make good decisions, uh, uh, there's a couple of things that seem to work for me, and I like to think that they might help you as well. First of all, when I feel that I'm walking on a tightrope, if I don't do, if I don't stay exactly on the straight and narrow, doing exactly this thing that I don't want to do, I consciously cut the tightrope. When I feel what I do when I feel like I've got no options or when I feel like I'm on a project that's just turning into something I don't want to have anything to do with, but I can't give it up because it's paying bills or because I've made legal contracts with people, I consciously step back and I think, you know what? I refuse to be on a tightrope. It's just not going to be the case that I'm going to allow myself to feel this much out of control of my own life. I'll just stop working for a little bit until I can get my head back into a more sensible state of mind. And the reason that I do that is because sometimes in the past, when I have been in that state of mind, when I felt very stressed out, when I can't think clearly, I've made mistakes that have turned out to be real problems for me later. So these days, when I get that tightrope feeling, I automatically force myself to step off the tightrope. One of the ways that I do that is I stop work and I start creating art that feels true and satisfying. I literally do take a break and I will write a short story. I will write a short film screenplay. I will work on some animation, all my stuff, all the kinds of work. If you've taken a look at a lot of my workshops, a lot of the content that I create and have created, I literally step off and I create something different. And I do that because I find it very centering. It kind of returns to me my voice and my feeling of agency. The other thing I like to do is even if I'm not instantly looking for a job or in the mood to look for a job, when I feel like I'm on a tightrope, I start shopping for new gigs. I start looking around for new opportunities, new things I could be doing, and I do it even though I don't necessarily have an intention of leaving right away. I do it to remind myself that there's a world outside this project, that there's a world that doesn't have anything to do with whatever current set of constraints I'm facing or what the people that I'm currently working with or the success or failure of this particular project. I find doing those two things makes it so I feel significantly more in control of not just the world generally, but the specific situation that's making me feel like I'm on a tightrope. The next thing I really like to do is exercise. Exercise is really important. And I think part of that's because it's really centering. You interacting in the real world with real things, whether it's going for a walk or in times past, I've gone for long drives and then gone for a walk. It's time for a while I was doing fencing. That was a really good mind break. I have consciously tried to work exercise into my day specifically because it does provide me with a very hard reset from fear, anger, disappointment, confusion, frustration, distress. And when I've been supporting other people who've been in really challenging times, and I've noticed that much of the time when people are in really stressful situations, particularly work situations, and particularly media work situations, often the first thing that they've stopped doing is exercising. And the reason is because they don't feel like they have time, but you do have time. In fact, you have to take the time because it helps you become more efficient subsequently. One or two daily non-stressful walks can significantly improve your sense of well-being, and you'll not only that, you can actually make it possible for you to feel better. If you haven't had any exercise for a long time and you felt like you're on a tightrope for a long time, even if something changes at your work and something gets slightly easier, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to feel that. Your emotions are still caught up in the stress and the tension from the situation that you had to live in for several days or several weeks. And so you're not going to feel any relief. So consciously exercising and making sure that you do it once or twice a day at the very minimum, I think is an important step to freeing up your mind so you can think more clearly and enjoy a better quality of life. If you can walk with friends or while listening to media that you really love, so much the better. I have a specific set of techniques that I use when I need to clear my head right this second, when I really have to get a grip on things immediately and I don't really have time to take even 24 hours to clear my head. And I hope you'll find them useful. In the past, and some of them I actually got from other folks who mentioned them to me. Some of them I developed on my own. The first one is think of the 10 biggest problems you've ever solved. So if you find yourself in a crisis situation and you're working on a media project and it just seems like there's nothing about it you like, and particularly when you find yourself in a situation where maybe you've got a project you have to raise money for from investors and you just haven't had any luck raising money from people, uh, or you've raised money from two or three people, but you are going to start shooting soon and you don't have the rest of your budget and you're starting to feel that sense of panic. Some of these things I think may help you solve that problem. Or when you've just published a book and the book's not selling and you've got two follow-on books that you're planning on releasing, and if the first book doesn't sell, the other ones aren't going to sell either, then that's another good time to take a mental health care break or reset your mind using some of these techniques. The first one is think of the 10 biggest problems you've ever solved. Close your eyes and literally think of 10 problems you thought you would never solve and remember exactly how you solved them. You don't have to spend a lot of time doing this. A lot of times it just becomes a laundry list of past successes. Like I remember I didn't know how I was going to pay for college. And then I figured out how to pay for college because I went to the college counseling department and I said, help me figure out how to pay for college. And they showed me about all kinds of grants and all kinds of loans. And now I have that fine Master's of Fine Arts degree. Or I didn't ever think I would get a chance, sell my first screenplay. How exactly did you do that? Going through the process of remembering 10 big problems and how they got solved reminds you, puts you into an analytical state of mind and helps you remember the steps that you took in order to make a big change in your quality of life. It is the fact that you are remembering that taking action changes things that is tremendously powerful. The next thing is think of your 10 greatest experiences. If you write down on a piece of paper the 10 greatest experiences that you never expected to have or thought you would never have, and remember what you liked about them and how it came that you had them, that also helps you see new options. For example, those of us who have children, you go, I remember when I didn't have kids, and I remember them, I remember we found out that a child was arriving, and then now I have this child and it's just a whole person and it's the best person I ever met. It's just a miracle and a wonder and I'm so happy. Or I remember that time my parents took me to the UK and they took me to the Tower of London and I had just never seen a real castle before, and I just to this day I still remember. By listing your 10 greatest experiences, what ends up happening is you remember that you don't know what's going to happen next. Nobody does. One of the biggest things that can happen to people that are in a crisis state of mind is they do start having black and white thinking and they do start thinking they know everything. And that closes off options very quickly. When you have your back against the wall, that's not the time to close off options. That's the time to look for options. And you're not going to be able to feel comfortable looking for them if you think you know everything. When you think you know everything, you think you know all the options. And most of the time, you don't. Finally, at the end, think of 10 things that you're unhappy about. And this is a time for you to be honest about what you actually don't like. Putting a name and a description to your irritations lets you start thinking about the problems you actually need to solve. For example, I do not hate this project. I do hate this creative collaborator. That helps you see the difference between the work and the person that you're working with. And that may help you resolve the problem. Maybe you can pick a new creative collaborator. Maybe you can figure out how to make this creative collaborator behave better. Alternatively, I like the work, but I need more money. Or I like the pay rate, but I need more work. This is not paying enough for me. I like the work itself, and I like how much I get paid when I am working. Like when I release a book, I like the fact that I make $2 or $3 or $5,000, but the sales fall off so quickly that it's not going to be enough money to generate revenue over the course of the year. How do I handle that problem? So these quick mind resets are a great way to, in a matter of minutes, force your head into a different headspace. And it could be the case you have to do them 2 or 3 or 4 times during a day or during a crisis, just because they do let you get centered for a few minutes, but then you have to dive back in and try to solve the problems that you're facing, and that's going to have a tendency to shove you back into the fight or flight response. Anyway, that's my experience. The next thing is we all have to get better at handling rejection. Because it is such a constant part of our life, and because people are constantly telling us what this invisible audience that nobody actually knows the name of will actually, we often find ourselves in a situation where our work is being rejected. We're not sure that the rejection is legitimate, and we're also not sure that we want to create what these people say they want. And that's true even when they're fans. Sometimes I think the tyranny of fans who love your work, they just want to see the same thing again and again. And you're like, you're not going to like it. If I keep producing exactly the same stuff, you're going to get bored and you're not going to like it. I have to do something new from time to time. And that's even when you're working for fans that pay you for your work. I think authors have a really hard time with that. Like musicians who basically their fans don't want to hear the music, the old music. They only ever want to hear the old songs. And you're like, I can't live just by selling the same old songs over and over again. I have to produce new music in order to be able to make a living at some point. Active outreach can be a real solution for handling rejection. Media is a numbers game. Actors, authors, and screenwriters who talk to more well-credited producers and learn what they're looking for earn more. They give themselves more opportunities to succeed. So one way to handle rejection is to make a conscious effort on a regular basis, as much as is humanly possible, to actively reach out to the kind of people that hire on a regular basis. Even if you don't need a job at any particular point, that's one of the reasons networking is such a big part of the entertainment industry. Producers who reach out to more funders, more distributors, more named talent, etc., on a regular basis tend to earn more. Writers who write more tend to earn more, like putting content into putting out a new book on a regular basis, putting out short stories that you share with your fans, reaching out to the people who pay you on a regular basis, or the kind of people that pay you on a regular basis, makes handling rejection much easier because you have more people to work with. So you don't really care what some people think because you know there's a lot of other fish in the sea. More rejections, quite frankly, is often a path to success. Really, if you're getting rejected on a regular basis, it's probably going to translate into you earning more on a regular basis because you're actually pitching more often. You're putting your work out to where people can say yes and can pay for it. Today's rejection leads to tomorrow's deals. A lot of salesmen think, hey, they look at their numbers and they go, if I call 20 people, I'll sell one car or whatever it is I'm selling. So they start looking for the 20 people who will say no, the 19 people that will say no, so they can reach the 20th guy who's going to say yes. If you think about rejection that way, it's a lot easier to handle. Second, control. Creatives are hired to create. And ultimately, as a creative, you decide what you're going to create and what you're not going to create. One reason to make sure that you create a good contract before you work with people is because contracts help you maintain control of your time and your earnings and the obligations you have to honor. Collaborators and co-workers can ask us to do things and we can say no. Now, this is particularly true when they're asking us to do unsafe or illegal things or things we didn't agree to. Sometimes no can be expensive to say, but occasionally is far less expensive than saying yes. Now, the reason that I put this in is if you were to go and take a look at one of the workshops I recommended that talks about contract law, which is led by the Sterling firm, what you'll notice is he talks about being put under duress. I think a lot of people who are working on projects that have taken a bad turn. A lot of the people working on those projects are being put under duress, whether they know it or not. And a lot of them don't understand the concept of duress. Concept of duress means if I'm working with you and I have to do, work X number of hours for this particular credit, or work this number of hours for this much money, or work this much in order to earn this title. And then you come back to me and you say, hey, you have to do this too. And it's, you know what? That's not part of our deal. You can't change the deal that way because I didn't agree to that deal. You can't just change the deal one hand unilaterally. It has to be an agreement between us. That's what a contract is for. That's why you need a contract. So the entertainment industry has this terrible habit these days of people working on projects for free and without any contracts. And the problem is that when there's no fundamental agreement between people, when nothing's written down and there's no actual statement about who owes who what, and when a deal is done, it can turn into sucking up a huge quantity of your time and a huge quantity of your creative effort and your joy, because it turns into this like honey trap you can't get out of. Active outreach and control, I think, do a huge amount to making you feel more comfortable in your work, making it so when people are cross with you, or when you're being asked to do things that you don't want to do, or they're rejecting the work that you've provided and demanding other work, active outreach and control, in my experience, make me weather that storm significantly better. Also, I think it's very important that people invest in creating active social networks. First of all, I do think it's important to get industry support. I think when people go to events where people talk about life as a creative, I think it's very important. I think those events make people feel less alone, and it helps to hear how other people cope with challenges and find new work and create a work-life balance. I think you can find lots of those events on Eventbrite and Meetup and Stage 32 and Roadmap Writers. I think you may also find those experiences by going to plays and film screenings, because you'll find people that are uh, all engaged in the industry that you want to work in and that you are working in. Next, I think it's important that people get creative networks and where they get creative support. And creative support is different than industry support. Industry support is about making money. It's about the business of the media business. Creative support is actually support for you as a creative, attending creative classes, attending workshops where you master new creative skills, or where you can interact with people who do art without the push to earn money from their work, can be incredibly centering, because most of us got into media because we like to create. And if we lose that fundamental joy in creation, the media is just another 9 to 5 job, and also one that has a lot of downsides in terms of its boom and bust nature and the necessity of finding new work on a regular basis. Finally, emotional support. The entertainment industry triggers many issues for many people. Many people benefit from groups like AA and NA and OA, where people dealing with addiction of various kinds find support. Because many people do self-medicate, I think if you're working in the entertainment industry and you find yourself struggling with alcohol or narcotics, or you find yourself like compulsively eating, finding one of these groups and participating in it actively could translate into a huge relief and exactly the kind of support you need when you need it. And I think most of us that have worked in the entertainment industry have known many folks who are participants in these programs and who are some of the nicest people in the industry, specifically because they do take care of their own mental health. Alternatively, many people benefit from attending anxiety, depression, and grief support groups that can help put feelings in context. You can find a bunch of those on Eventbrite. And also, it's also important to remember that you can get one-to-one professional counseling, and it can be a great investment. I think many creatives do seek professional help because we do have to be functional 24/7. If you're working as a media creative and you're creating content that you're on a regular basis that you're going to be selling or using to sell other things, if you're working on the ad side of things, you actually have to have a functional brain, right? You can't not be functional. You actually have to be able to think clearly. You have to be able to get work out the door. You have to be able to communicate with people that you're working with, and you have to be able to understand what, to some degree, what you think audiences are going to love or what they expect. There's a lot of technical issues. You really can't be crazy, right? So I think one of the reasons that creatives are known for their therapists and known for their psychologists and all those things, one of the reasons they're known for that is because they actually have to be mentally strong in order to be able to do their best work. And failure to get that support in this very tense industry can make it so you just get farther and farther out of whack until you're so non-functional, people don't want to work with you. I think if you engage in getting this kind of support and you make it a kind of a focus or one of your objectives to make sure that you have industry support, creative support, and emotional support on an ongoing basis, I think you may find working in the entertainment industry or in media making it significantly easier and significantly more profitable. Cultivating a robust state of mind is a worthy investment. It starts by recognizing when you feel badly and taking the time required to understand what your feelings are. Are you feeling dismayed? Are you feeling fear? Are you feeling disappointment? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling rage? Expressing your feelings. Most creatives explore and understand their complex feelings through their art. So creating art can be very centering for a lot of people, especially if it's art that you think is authentic and honest and true and cool. You're creating your own work, even while you're working for other people, can be hugely important to a great state of mind. And I think it's important not to give up that refuge because you happen to be selling your skills to others from time to time. Keeping healthy and connected is critical. Do walk, keep moving, create and maintain your social relationships with people that you actually like. Focus on your quality of life, not just on dollars and cents, because otherwise life here in the entertainment industry can be really costly. And finally, focus on your ability and creating your ability and maintaining an ability to see your options. We live in Los Angeles, which is a mecca in the whole world, where some of the most creative minds and the most brilliant people, the most talented people come. So we're really lucky. There's a lot of things that are possible here that aren't necessarily possible every place on earth. That means we do have a lot of options. Whatever we need, whether it's a gig that pays well or a job that pays more or a different team to work with, it can be had, but you have to actually look for it. Getting what you want is easier if you've given yourself a lot of options. It's important to remember that success in media is all about reaching a paying audience. Audiences are the source of success in media. Creating content that people will pay for is how you get wealthy, how you prove you're worth hiring, etc. So your creative work, your individual creative work is important because often it, more often than not, that work eventually is going to be what makes people, audiences fall in love with you. If you never produce that work, if they never get to see it, it's going to be hard for you to get the recognition that you need and the support that you need in order to be playing a role as a lead creative on projects. Media is a collaborative business. There's a lot of media, and a lot of media that pays the best is created in collaboration with others and with the notion that you'll be able to sell your combined work for more than you could each sell your work individually. Sometimes that isn't true. Acknowledging that is important from time to time. Finally, you're not doing media wrong if you hit hard spots or hit times of insecurity or uncertainty. It is, honest to God, the nature of the industry. Audiences are fickle, economics and technology are always changing. You're going to hit rocky times. So actively manufacturing options for yourself by submitting your work, applying for gigs, building good networks, all those things help you get good options to exploit. The media business is very stressful because it is very capricious. We rely on audiences and the economy and the news cycle, as well as our ability to create with and without others in order to generate revenue. It is very easy to lose yourself in a hall of mirrors. We start defining ourselves and the work we care the most about by what people buy. So we think, I must not be a very good writer because not a lot of people buy my work. And it's how many people have you reached out to? How many people have you tried to sell your work to? Have you sold it to audiences yet? Sometimes We haven't had the experience. The reason that we're not getting the feedback that we want is because we're not talking to the right people and because we're not making our work widely enough available. Or it's because we're working as part of a team and the team that we're working on is not really in alignment with us from a creative standpoint or a personality standpoint. And we just have to muscle through till we can give ourselves a better opportunity. I hope the tools and the tips in this workshop will help you stay grounded and reasonably content, professionally effective, and income earning going forward. If you have questions about this workshop, you can email me at nancyfultonmeetups.com.